It says the Hangout is live on air. I never trust it. I never trust this until it goes live up in that corner up there. Hello, good afternoon, good morning, good evening. I don't know what I'm going to call this. I wanted to chat with Richard Parker of Altitude Angel because he's very kindly embed his map onto our website, but I don't really know what it's about or what it's for or what reason why even it's worth bothering. So let's share. Let me try and screen share. Let's go for SES News to start with. Share. There we go. Richard, I don't know. Can we see that? Is that?
Yep, I can see it, Gary. It's good.
Okay. All right. Okay. And now I'm going to jump off back to it and click the map. I'm wondering if that's changing as well.
It's loading. Yeah.
It's loading. That's good. Life is good. So I'm going to have a map on SES News, and it's going to land on London. How's that going to help me? What's it? Oh, I better agree to that. Better agree to these terms and conditions.
I'm glad you read that in detail.
Oh, I did. I read it many. What was that? I've sold all my children. Hey, yeah, how's that go? So, but how's it going to help me? It's loading as it loads. It's just another airspace map. I mean, at the end of the day, so what?
Cool. Okay, so let me talk you through what we're hoping to achieve and what we're trying to help out with here. But what we've been, since we kind of started the company 2.5 years ago, we've had a lot of people say, we love your map, but can we embed it into our own site? Can we build our own applications on top of it? Can we use your data? So as part of what we do at Altitude Angel, we make tools available to folks that want to build applications for UAVs, and we make tools available for national entities like governments and regulators that want to be able to better interface or produce better data for the use of drone pilots. So what we're doing here and what you've got embedded into sesnews.com is your very own version of our map, which is branded according to you, and the brand that you see there is done by you guys at sesnews.com. But then it allows you, if you wanted to take that experience a little bit further and then start to add your own experiences in line with various actions on the map. So, for example, if you would be so kind as to click on the large blue circle just north of the Thames, over West Thurrock, that
I've clicked it. It might take forever on my web. Is anything happening?
Not on the screen. There you go. So it's come up.
There we go.
So what's actually happening is there you're using all of Altitude Angel's standard, interactions, all of our standard user interface. But what you could do as a developer is actually start building your own applications on this now. So you could add your own text, you could add your own forms to fill out, you could pull in data from your own flight management system. So you can build a really rich experience. But what we've started to do is essentially solve the first of those two main requests that people have been giving us, which is, can I get a copy of your map embedded in our site? And that's what you've done, and hopefully you guys found that quite a simple process. Once we've created a security key for you guys, you basically just cut and paste a little bit of code into your website, and then you too can benefit from all of the global safety data and the safety map that we have on dronesafetymap.com, but in your site embedded for your users and your community. And what that means obviously is users of sesnews.com don't have to go anywhere else. They don't have to leave your website. They can get that data directly where they are. Now, obviously, because it's Altitude Angel, it means you're getting the world's most accurate, reliable, up-to-date data for all the countries that we cover. And every time we add a new country, you guys at sesnews.com, you don't have to do anything, you don't have to update anything. It just automatically pulls all that data through from AA. So in other words, what we wanted to really focus on was extending that capability that we have in keeping everything fresh and keeping everything up to date to all of the folks that go around and embed our maps in their own sites. So you will find that the exact look and feel of your map here and the exact data that appears in here also appears on dronesafetymap.com as well. So it's all instantaneous. And then finally, the thing that we're most excited about here, or one of the things we're most excited about, is the ability to start gathering telemetry about how people are interacting with the data that we display. So, you're looking at quite a zoomed out view over London here, and it's unlikely that that would be a useful view to anyone conducting a UAS flight. But as you zoom in, you're going to start to get additional information about that area that's contextually relevant to you. And what we're keen to understand at Altitude Angel is how much of that do people use? What formats could we provide it in that makes it more usable? Is there stuff missing that we could add? Is the user interface geared up to best support the kind of interactions that we're giving? So every time you're clicking on stuff here, we're sending anonymous feedback to Altitude Angel, and our system's collecting how long you hover over this park, what you do in this location on the map, what filters you turn on and off. That's a good indicator for us, for example, for working out, are we displaying way too much information by default? Should we turn more of it off and let people turn on the bits that they want, or should we go by showing everything up front? So what we're really trying to do is make sure that we get this, what is quite becoming increasingly more critical safety information into more people's hands, into the formats that make most sense for them. And again, it'd be completely pointless, wouldn't it, for us, to just kind of throw this information out and just hope that it makes sense to people. So much of what we do at Altitude Angel is trying to make this complex aeronautical information, complex geospatial information much simpler for people to be able to rely on and to use. So yeah, that's really, probably a 100,000-foot view of what we're hoping to achieve, and certainly, we definitely want to thank you guys for trialing this for us and putting it into SEASnews.com.
The way I can, well, you've got a hugely granular information, as I call it. You really do have to have zoomed out too much, haven't I? Let's go back in. The parks and sensitive areas, prisons, schools, and all that sort of a thing. How did you end up? How did you decide that you wanted to have that level of information in this? Other people just have controlled airspace.
Yeah, so I think we've really approached the act of being a drone pilot from the ground up, right? Which is actually quite synonymous with where you start your flights. You're a UAV pilot, you start on the ground, you stay on the ground while you fly your drone around. So we figured actually, what we wanted to be able to do was ultimately increase your situation awareness. So for us to do that requires a very comprehensive picture of what's around you. And obviously, the majority of things that are around you as a drone pilot are actually on the ground. You do need to understand what's happening in the airspace, absolutely. You do need to understand what the regulations are where you are. But a lot of people, especially commercial pilots, are encountering an area for the first time when they get there, or they're doing a risk assessment before. And what we're trying to do here is give them as much information as they can in advance about the potential safety considerations and complexity of operating in a particular area. And to do that, we need to rely on lots of different types of data. So that's why we've selected things like parks, power pylons, where we've got that data, major highways. In the UK, for example, and in lots of places across Europe, actually, we do crazy things like we hide all of our power transformers behind hedges. So when you're on the ground and you're flying around, you've got what looks like a bunch of very neatly trimmed hedges, but actually behind it's a lot of high voltage power infrastructure. So we try and expose that so that you can be mindful of that as a drone pilot.
And that's just help me understand. That must be terabytes of data. I might ask you a proprietary question here. You don't have to answer, but you must have like really big servers and stuff, and lots of people checking.
Yeah, so we have, we've built lots of proprietary systems for ingesting this data, but one of the key things that we really like to focus on Altitude Angel is the quality of that data. So we have more systems which, some we can kind of reuse from existing projects, and some we've had to build, frankly, from scratch to meet the kind of very high quality bar that we have. But I would say, there's a lot of data there, but actually where we have hundreds of servers, that's mainly to provide scalability and reliability rather than to deal with the quantity of the data. So, right. The infrastructure that you're looking at on Altitude Angel is smart in the sense that, it knows where you are in the world when you're accessing it, and it connects you to one of our data centers that's closest to you geographically to cut down on the transmission time, so you get a faster map experience than if, for example, we only had servers in the UK and you connect from South Africa to the UK. That would be quite slow. Right, so yes. All of those kind of things are happening in the background that you don't see, but hopefully what you do feel is, every time you go to dronesafetymap.com or one of Altitude Angel's API products and services, you never get greeted with a blank page that says, sorry, the service is down. And that's really
Right.
because, you know, as a company, yes, we're making this data available to you as a user interface product, you know, via a map, but predominantly as a company, we're focused on trying to get this information digitally into more and more drones around the world. So in the future, there could be hundreds of millions of vehicles connecting to Altitude Angel rather than hundreds of thousands of people. And that requires a very different scale and quality of infrastructure. So we've had to build all of this from the ground up to support that today, because retrofitting it later is really hard and really expensive.
So do you see in the future this becoming the hitchhiker's guide to the galaxy for the drone itself, and it's going to call in and say, excuse me, what do you know about over here? You're going to hand out the data back to it, and on it's going to go.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are lots of different models, and I think this is kind of moving into the kind of the whole UTM territory, and there are loads of different competing theories what that's going to be. And you know, our job, that as we see it at Altitude Angel, is to help people get stuff into the air and to fly around in that airspace safely and not affect people on the ground unduly, right? That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to unlock that drone market. So to enable that to happen, regulators need to see that technical companies can address a lot of the safety concerns that are there. You know, we can't do all of that on our own because ultimately we don't manufacture a drone. So drone manufacturers have got a part to play, pilots have a part to play. But we absolutely see that, you know, one of the most fundamental questions today, before you do anything with the drone, is can I fly my drone or this particular drone in this particular location at this particular time and for this particular purpose? Now you'd think that's a really easy question to answer, but digitally it's not that easy to answer. So someone in the future, you know, if we think about what Altitude Angel might be doing in 2 or 3 years' time, we would love to be one of the predominant suppliers of that information to people, but actually our goal is really not to think so much about the end users. It's to enable other companies that want to create fantastic end user experiences, do amazing things with drones, to be able to come to Altitude Angel as a kind of business to business supplier of those platform technologies that help them make better products for their customers, because someone's got to invest the money to make sure it's done reliably, it's got to be done authoritatively, got to be done with respect to local laws, and that's really the kind of the drum that we're banging there, is that we want to be able to provide the best kind of service we can for the people that use our services.
Now I've zoomed in here, and luckily I saw some power lines. I was just flipping around in America because I noticed that you have the FAA UAS facility map data, which is a mouthful, isn't it? And I was hoping to zoom in onto some of those, but in the meantime, there's some power lines somewhere in America. So I'm going to pull back from that and see if we've lucked in, and there they go. So that might be useful. Now they've not put the maps out for every airfield, have they? So I might have landed somewhere.
Are you looking for one at an airport? You can have a look at Aransas, or if you like, have we got a chat that I can paste the link into you? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, hang on. Let's just drive around. Surely Aransas. Surely I can search for that. How do I spell that then?
ARANSAS. And it should come up Aransas County. It's a great named airport.
There it is. All right. There we go. Right. So here we go. Off to Aransas County. Oh, they probably have flooding here recently then.
So let me. I can send you a latitude and longitude in the chat as well.
Here we are. Now we're here. We're here. I've zoomed into it. And now this zooming into to grab and the data arriving. What's happening then? If I can ask you that.
So basically, you know, the map is kind of watching. It's kind of from a technical perspective, it's watching how you're interacting with it. So every time you zoom, the system waits for you to stop zooming. You know, it only takes a couple of milliseconds of you not zooming, and then it sends a request to Altitude Angel and says, right, here, the top left boundary of my web browser is looking at this latitude and longitude, and the bottom right boundary is looking at this latitude and longitude. And then we create a rectangle from that, go back to Altitude Angel's map data service. You know, and just for clarity as well, you know, we use, to build the map experience that you're looking at, we use exactly the same developer APIs that are available to our customers and to our partners as well. So we, you know, I think the Americans call that eating your own dog food. You know, we absolutely, or drinking your own champagne, I think is probably a nicer. You know, we use our own first party products and services and our own tools. And then basically what it's doing is sending a query saying to Altitude Angel, what's in this region? It's also sending the current time. so we know when that is, and you can project forwards and backwards in time on our professional APIs. We don't do that through our user interface at the moment. And then that way, we're able to return a very comprehensive picture on what's in the air and what's in the ground. And you can actually, you know, bizarrely, you can see all of this happening if you hit F12 on your browser, Gary. You're in
F12,
Chrome, I can see
F12,
that.
yes.
So if you press
F12
F12,
it is.
you should see the development
There we are.
pop up. And if you hit the network tab,
oh, this is for people who don't get out much.
It is. Now you see those.
Oh, there it is.
So
yes.
if you click on that, one of those GeoJSON items that are showing there, what you should see.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah.
So I can't see if your screen's updated yet. Try clicking the other one because one of them will come back with some data. Oh, you've got preview enabled. So just go response. There you go. So you've got some data. If you click expand that one that says features.
I'm not looking there.
So
Where I'm looking now.
3 arrows that are kind of pointing to the right in front of the purple text. So you want the bottom one that says features.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And that's all the data,
okay.
returning all the different shapes and describing all the different airspace and ground items that you're looking at there. So you can expand all of those, and you'll find eventually, if you're lucky, one of those will correspond with something you've clicked on the map, for example. So that one there is describing hazard factor name. What does that say? It said danger, I think.
Danger.
So it's describing a danger zone.
So when I want to rip off altitude Angel, I just have to sit here and do this all night long, one by one, and I.
Yes, you could do that, or you could just ask for API key, and we'll give it to you, so you get the best developer experience. But
I could just do that then, couldn't I? Now the reason I wanted to do this was because Rocket Port Class, what a great name, eh? So altitude jurisdiction 0 feet. So if you're a Part 107 operator in the United States of America, you need to apply to use or to fly and control airspace to do jobs, and the FAA have these grids, don't they? And within the grids, it tells you how high you can fly or likely to get away with. So I've hit all noughts. That's no good, is it?
Yeah, you probably found one where they don't allow any flights.
Don't allow any flights at all.
So actually,
there's 100. There's 100 feet. There's one.
Yeah, there's a couple of them.
You can go and film the dolphins. So you for the airfields that have it enabled over there, you can go and have a look and make that part of where I wanted to go with that can be part of your pre-flight planning. So I can see that being a very cool tool. I did notice. Let's go up to what I wanted to ask you about was Alan, who also comes onto our weekly chats, said to me when we had a look at it the other day that there's two sorts of definitions for pilots in Canada, or two sets of restrictions. And I see in America that you have Part 107, 333, or just private flights. Do you have that sort of thing for Canada as well, so you can change how the map views?
Yeah, so I think there's definitely two answers to that. So the first answer is yes, we have this information, and the second answer is what do we expose in our own products and in our own user interface. So today you're looking at Drone Safety Map, which is more or less a copy of what we have on our website, but the data that sits behind that is supported by something we call our digital regulation endpoint. Now, we haven't completed all of the integration of that into our embeddable maps for other people yet, but what that service essentially does is that service, in addition to being told where you're looking at, it then queries our digital regulation endpoint and says, okay, what rules can I fly under here? Are there multiple rules, or is there just one? And then what it starts to do as well is it can take information from your drone operator profile, which is another tool that we have, and it can say, okay, well, you know, Gary is flying a 6 kilogram drone that he's built himself, and he's flying it commercially, and we take all these variables, send that up to the server together with your requests for information about the area, and then we vary the shapes and the colors of those shapes and the advice that we give in response to that. Now, all of that technology today exists in our APIs for our own customers to use directly. And what we're still trying to work out as a business is, you know, do we want to go ahead and put all of this stuff into our own first-party maps, or are we content to make it available for other people to embed in their products? And you know, where we're kind of heading into is definitely a version 1.1 of our drone safety map, and we're part of the reason for us, getting this version of the map out there is to get folks feedback. So if we find that that becomes an important thing, then absolutely, we'll add that in. But it obviously gets very complicated, and like I said, it comes right back to that fundamental question. How do we help people answer that question? Can I fly this drone in this place at this time for this purpose? Clearly, the less we know about what you're doing, then the less accurate we can be in the data that we return. In other words, the more kind of generic that data becomes rather than personalized. So that's where the digital regulation endpoint really comes into play, because it will combine all of that information in the background for you. So in addition to getting these wonderful filters on the left, you'll be able to tell us about your particular mission that you're trying to get information for. And you might be able to see a little box there that says, actually, I'm flying commercially. If you've got drones registered with us, then you'll be able to choose the drone that you want to check against. So you might have one that's 3 kilograms and one that's 50 kilograms, and clearly those those variables are going to affect the data that we give you, because the laws will be different in different countries.
And these, I just jumped back to New York. These are the brand new restrictions. Yeah. They came in earlier this month, didn't they?
Yeah.
So you're up to date with that. In a previous life, I used to have to pull things off teleprinters and draw them on walls and things like that. Do you have a spotty youth somewhere in your office that pulls things off teleprinters? And how on earth do you keep up? Because it's no big thing, is it, to be updating the world's aviation database?
No, it's pretty challenging, and I can assure you, we decided as a business very early on that we didn't want to employ hundreds of people to just sit around and kind of code this stuff in, because that kind of process is fraught with errors. So we obtain most of our data directly from the various authoritative data sources that there are. So for example, in Europe, that would predominantly be for aeronautical data. That would be from Eurocontrol. The US, that's from the FAA. We've got different geographical and weather and environmental providers all around the world. But when it comes to something like our NOTAMs, NOTAMs are predominantly a human-generated data source, right? They contain a lot of text, and the people that are creating those NOTAMs, probably creating many of them throughout the day, they make mistakes, and they're describing what is often some pretty complicated geospatial shapes. So, they do things like they swap the latitude and the longitude coordinate around. So we have to build systems which can look for these kind of error conditions. And we actually use quite a lot of machine learning algorithms to help us process that NOTAM feed. So what actually does happen is, 99 point something ridiculously high % of all the data we get just appears on our maps, because it is past all of that computer models and just appears automatically. What's left gets sent for human review. So we built some of our own geospatial kind of editing tools, if you like, which surface the exceptions to Altitude Angel. And when we are reviewing those, that's where we have a skilled human that can look at those exceptions and then say back to the system, just to prove this, it's fine, or actually no, this is clearly an error. We need to get back in touch with the person that was responsible for creating this, notify them of that error, which has actually happened more often than not at AA. And then finally, what we can say to Altitude Angel's geospatial processing systems is, okay, update your model, because this is a new type of thing, or this is a new way of describing this thing. So update the computer model so that the next time you see it, you don't need to bug another human about it. So it's in that respect, the more data we feed it, the more it learns, and the better it gets.
Okay, I've made a mistake here. I'm not driving this very well. But if I was operating commercially and I was using this day in, day out, I would be getting better at driving this. I was looking for another airfield then with that grid on it. And the reason I was looking for that was I was going to lead in and say, well, okay, so if I want to fly in that grid, can I click on it? And then this week we hear about, is it Lattice? I can't remember. I don't even know how they say it. But authorizing flights, LAANC, the other one. Yeah, okay, LAANC, that's it. Lattice was, and it doesn't matter, does it? But through Altitude Angel, can I apply to the FAA to go flying or get a permission?
So yes, what I would say is take a step back and take the FAA out of the equation. What we're hoping to create is a facility whereby you don't really, as a developer or as a manufacturer, or even as a user of our maps, you don't need to be worried about the country you're requesting permissions to fly in. You'll have the same experience requesting the right permissions to fly wherever you are. And Altitude Angel will take care of transforming that in the background into a connection to whatever system is currently in place in that particular country or territory. And actually, you know, in lots of places across Europe, this isn't a case about applying to, you know, necessarily to one entity. If it's, you know, for example, a lot of airports you'll have to request permission to fly within a particular vicinity of. In that case, that permissions request has to go to the airport owner. But it's not just airports. It could be other types of protected facilities as well. So if you kind of take a step back, you know, what we're building at Altitude Angel is essentially a plug-in architecture where we can say, right, okay, in the US, these are the rules that apply. So in this particular type of location, you need to request this particular type of permission. And it so happens that that comes from the LAANC system or the LAANC system, depending on how you choose to pronounce it. And what we'll do is, you know, we'll present, you know, the relevant user interface to you, request that information on your behalf, and manage the communication back and forth. And actually, what we're about as a company is in turning that permissions application process, that workflow between you today as the operator, but tomorrow potentially the drone itself, handling that communication in a standardized way through our APIs. So we're building all of this into our APIs first. And you remember what I said right at the start, you know, our drone safety map uses our own products, uses our own APIs. It uses about 5% of all of the APIs that we have available today, because we're API first. And we're also not in the business of competing with our partners, right? You have a lot of partners that are out there building flight planning applications. I think obviously you've got folks like Consortic, who I know you have David on your show quite a lot. You know, those guys have got a great flight planning product and process management product, and they overlay their own intelligence onto the maps as well. So what we're about is enabling the Consortics of the world to be able to create better experiences for their end users to apply for those permissions digitally. So that's the long answer, and the short answer is yes, you will be able to do that through Altitude Angel.
but how on earth are you going to be in a position to, well, speak to the South African civil, get the South African Civil Aviation Authority on board? Because that's what you'd have to do.
Yeah, so again, I mean, it's a difficult problem, right? This is not a problem we're trying to solve for one country. It's a problem we want to solve for all countries. And as you all know, being an astute observer of all of these things, each country is, you know, looking at different ways of doing things. You've got potentially different ways of doing things in different jurisdictions, from a state, a local and a national perspective, international perspective. Even in Europe, you've got things like U-Space, which are coming along and seek to standardize, you know, vast parts, but leave room for each member state to customize that process. And yes, it's going to be a bit of a challenge, but what we're trying to do at Altitude Angel is create, you know, you've got two approaches as a company, right? You can be carrot or you can be stick. And what we're trying to do is create carrots for people, because one thing which is clear is we can't continue as a country, for example. If we were talking about South Africa or the UK is irrelevant, but as a country, it's difficult to continue and see how we're going to support drone flights going forwards if we've got lots of disparate sources of data all over the place and updated on different cycles, produced to different quality standards. Drones, if we want them to evolve, are going to need access to data that they can trust, to much more granular information than is currently available through things like the aeronautical information publications. So we have to create the tools that enable governments and regulators and authorities to be able to better produce and manage that data. And then in so doing, they're starting to contribute to solving the overall problem, which is starting, you know, for us, from our perspective, that is starting to connect the various stakeholders together. That's step one. You know, you can't jump straight to step infinity, which is fully deployed UTM, autonomous air traffic control for drones, no humans in the loop. That's what, you know, a lot of other folks out there are trying to pitch and peddle. But, you know, for us, today we're in what we call UTM1, which is an internal name, probably talking a little bit proprietary here, but for us, UTM1 is really more about the connecting the various different stakeholders in the airspace and involved in a drone operation with each other in a much more efficient mechanism. So broadly speaking, that's giving Gary Mortimer access to the best safety information that we can give him, so he can improve his situation awareness, but also being able to allow Gary to declare where he wants to fly so that we can share that with other interested stakeholders, which isn't necessarily only other drone pilots. We've got a lot of airports trialing our software right now. We've got a lot of ANSPs around the world who are interested in who's flying in the vicinity of certain areas that they care about. So we're trying to solve that initial workflow problem, and that, I think, is one part of the approach to making sure that we're in a good position to solve this on a global perspective.
I guess you start at the beginning. It just seems such a huge thing to have to do.
I wouldn't disagree with you.
Dogs are going nuts here. I might have to do a South African security thing very shortly. I'll see.
Gosh, okay.
I'll see. So I logged on because I can, and what I wanted to talk about was submitting a flight report. So here's my house, and I don't know if you can see this.
Yeah, it's a little delayed for me, but I think I can see it. Yeah, I can see you.
So say test, and I'll say, well, what does this do? So if I submit, it says recreational, I'll fly right now. It says European London, and I'll say continue. So that's put up this yellow.
So you can drag that circle. You can drag that circle to where you want to actually fly. And that circle is 500 meters radius. So from the center point, we assume that you're standing in the middle of that circle.
Right.
Yeah. So you drop that on your takeoff location, and that's roughly what
the look up there. Yeah.
And then if you hit continue, we'll create a flight report for that. Okay, now in a few seconds, what we'll do is we'll publish that on our map. So whereabouts are you in the world there? I can't actually see.
That's near Rosetta in South Africa. Rosetta, South Africa.
So I'm going to go and have a look. You're polluting our system with all of your test data. Let's go have a look. No, I can't spell, apparently. There we go. So I can see your flight report, and I can see test, and this is a user submitted flight report. So if you click on it, you'll get some different options to the ones I get, because the system recognizes that it's your flight report. So you get that little complete flight report button, which basically takes it off the map.
Right.
But what our system has done there is announce that it's available in all of our APIs now. It's available to any other, for example, Mission Planner. This data would show up in Mission Planner to show people that there's a nearby drone operation. But in our system, there is a lot of other things happening. So, for example, in a lot of our mobile applications, if you download the Guardian mobile application, you get exactly the same experience. You say, right, I'm going to create a flight report. You drag your circle to where you want to fly, but you can optionally turn on something called airspace alerts. It's free, it doesn't cost anything. But if you click on that, what Altitude Angel then does is around and I can't tell you all the proprietary parts of this, but at a much greater radius around your declared flight location, we start to become very interested in what's happening in that region. And what I mean by that is, we're receiving worldwide position updates for real-time aircraft movements. We're receiving real-time weather information. We're receiving a real-time NOTAM feed. And what Altitude Angel is doing, when you just tick that little box that says, yes, give me airspace alerts, then for the duration of your flight, we'll tell you about any incoming low-flying aircraft that we have detected. We'll tell you about any severe weather conditions that might become a problem for you. And we'll tell you about any changes to the regulations in the airspace. So that area you flew in didn't have any NOTAMs that were present, but if there was suddenly an incident there, or regulations changed, or a piece of airspace suddenly became active, you get a text message on your phone telling you what that thing is that you need to know about.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
so that's on the app on the phone. So your phone's in your hand because you're doing a flight operation, and yes, you're going to get as you're doing a commercial operation, you're going to get an alert of change within this predefined area, and that's a worldwide experience, is it?
Yeah, it's worldwide, obviously, with the caveats that we're only as good as the data that we get. So you go and speak to anyone in the manned aviation world, and they'll be the first people to tell you that they can't even see where all their own planes are at any one time. And famously, you've got communities of private pilots that fly around without so-called ADS-B transponders on board. There are black spots with radar coverage. So we are very clear and upfront when you activate the Airspace Alert Service how it works and what its limitations are. But we operate on the basis that good information is better than no information. So what we're trying to do here is say, okay, well, there's a lot of information that is available, but you wouldn't otherwise have access to. So how can we improve your situation awareness? Well, first off, we can clean all the information that's coming in and only give you what's relevant. Actually, there are a couple of USPs at Altitude Angel, and one of them for us, which is, we really stress over at the beginning of every software project, is how can we make this relevant to the person using it? So it'd be completely irrelevant to you if we were telling you about that Virgin Atlantic flight that's 30,000 feet or 35,000 feet above your head. It's never going to be a problem for you, right? But that air ambulance, which is coming in and is currently at 1,000 feet, for example, but we've seen it over the last couple of, over the last couple of 100 meters is starting to descend. If it's heading towards you and is likely to come within a few miles of you, then what we could do is, and we've got an option, right? We could just tell you about it, or we could actually say, Gary, turn to your east in 1 minute at a height of 500 feet. We expect this vehicle to come through. Please land, right? And that's exactly the kind of message that you get from Airspace Alerts today. Like I say, we're doing other things with Airspace Alerts now. I've got a lot of features. I promise I'll be the first to come back and tell you first before everyone else. But we've got some great updates planned to all of our mobile apps that will start to make this information even more accessible. So if you think about, your job as a drone pilot is to keep your eye on your drone. The last thing we want you doing is staring at your map more often than you're staring at your drone. So we're experimenting with lots of ways, bearing in mind, things like human factors, how people consume information, making sure that we make that information available to you at just the right time, just the minimum amount of intervention possible to not distract you, but give you exactly what you need to know. So it's a bit like having a trusted friend or trusted advisor who's keeping an eye on everything for you and gently nudges you and says, right, you need to be aware of this thing. Rather than the approach you've given you, kind of like a flight radar. Those guys are great. What they do is fantastic, but it's not really good from a safety perspective, because we don't want to show you 50 flights that are near you. We only want to show you that one flight that's heading towards you that you need to take action against.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So if I hit complete, so I stop polluting a system, I hit complete flight report here.
Yep.
And yes, I'm sure I want to do that. So would you have you logged that now? Would I be able to go back and say, oh, this happened, and this happened while I was flying?
Yeah. So if you expand our menu, I think you've got the filters open there. If you close the filters and then just open up the little hamburger menu on the left, you should see.
I never knew they were called. I never knew they were called hamburger menus, but then I'm an old man. There we are.
So there you go. So what we've got there, you see we've assigned it part of a unique ID, so that's your unique ID, but there's a massive globally unique ID that goes with that. I don't think you've got anything else that you can click in this version of the map at the moment, but our system has recorded a bunch of stuff in our data stores that, if you're a developer customer of ours, you can get access to. And actually, we're just trying to figure out what's the appropriate user interface experience to put over this. But we recorded what was on the map when you declared the flight. And for example, in the back end, if you'd been asking us to check airspace alerts, we'd record automatically into your own flight report anything that we saw in the airspace. So did we see any temporal changes? Were there any airspace incursions from other aircraft? Did we track any other drone flights nearby? What was the weather at the start? What was the weather when you clicked end? All the stuff that you're required to do as a commercial drone pilot, with a bit of extra stuff thrown in to make that recording and reporting exercise easier for you.
And what would that have cost me?
For the airspace alerts, it wouldn't have cost you anything.
So, and the reporting part of it?
The reporting part is, again, it's all provided for you. We charge our professional, our business customers who want to make software using this capability. We charge those an access fee to access those kind of subscription services where they want to enhance their own products using our technologies. There's a fee for that. But you as the end user, you can come along and make use of the kind of relatively basic user interface that we provide without a fee. And that's a basic principle for us, right? you know, speaking purely selfishly and commercially, we benefit as a business when more people are flying drones. But actually, everyone could potentially say the same thing, right? You know, we could improve lives with more drone technology. We could, you know, we can revolutionize businesses with more drone technology. So what we're trying to do here is say, well, we've got all of this data sat in our database, and everyone around the world is saying people need better information about where they can fly and when. So why don't we just give it out? You know, we don't intend to make money from giving this to you, Gary, but if you want to take this data, these basic building blocks, and build a really amazing commercial experience for your end users, then it's those guys that we collect a bit of a fee from.
Wow. That's, well, I'm a bit, I don't don't understand. You've not come from the drone business. It doesn't work like this. Now, if I flip Windows like that, did it change in what I was sharing?
Yes, it does. I can see the current, what we would refer to as our old map, but is in theory it's our current map.
Because the reason I wanted to put this on and make sure it was on this video was this bit where it says create free account. Because if you want to use Altitude Angel within Mission Planner, if you're an ArduPilot type, then you should have a free account, and that's one way of getting your free account. And then Mission Planner anyway, you can log on, and then all of this data that we've been talking about now will appear on Mission Planner, which is fantastic. It is very, very, very cool indeed, and it saves, at the end of the day, it saves the ArduPilot team a lot of trouble of trying to gather all this information themselves. And you seem to, so are you able to see what people are doing? It's quite, so I'm guessing not quite so much on.
No, I mean, we can't see.
They are.
We're very privacy mindful at Altitude Angel, and obviously we also have to consider privacy at a sovereign level as well. So certain states require us to, for example, in Germany, you know, we can't take German customer data outside of the sovereign state of Germany. So we have different privacy considerations to also consider. But what we do collect is information about, you know, what's being sent out of our system, so we can see, you know, that there's a person in this location looking at this area of the map, but we can't see who that is. If you create a flight report, then you know, in the process of doing that, the terms that you're agreeing to is to share that information with other people, including us. Actually, it'd be crazy if you couldn't share it with us, then we couldn't share it with anyone else. So it'd be a bit pointless doing that. So, you know, we obviously need to take hold of that. But actually, what you can't see on my screen is when I clicked on your flight report, I couldn't see that it was Gary Mortimer's flight report. I couldn't see that you created it from this type of device or that IP address. You know, we shielded all of the personally sensitive information from it and shared the circle and the time of the operation, as well as the description that you chose to give us. So actually in our guidance, for example, we tell people, please don't put your phone number in here because we'll share it. You know, that's not the purpose of this. And, you know, we're already looking at, you know, because we do get people that do put their phone numbers in, and we're already building systems that look for phone numbers and take them out.
Wow.
But going back to the Mission Planner one, sorry, just to say, you know, going back to the Mission Planner one, all of the data that you're seeing on all of our maps is now available as kind of natively within the Mission Planner experience. And, you know, that was because, you know, I was building drones probably before they were called drones, right? They were just remote controlled aircraft, and I became aware of Mission Planner like most people. They kind of Google around and then they go, I need something to control all my drones, and you come across this fantastic open source piece of kit called Mission Planner. So you download it and you install it, and, you know, and we just recognized they had a fairly static data set, and we just said, right, okay, let's go work with these guys. Let's give them access to all of this data. You know, it's an open source project, so we're not going to charge anyone for it. So how do we do that? And we decided that the best way to do it was to enable Mission Planner users to use Altitude Angel's data as if they were on altitudeangel.com, which is why it says, hey, please log in. As soon as you log in, you're essentially grabbing exactly the same data that you get on AA, but using whatever experience it is that the Mission Planner team feel is the best experience to give you.
No, it's very cool. Thank you very, very much for doing that. Yeah, I love it, and I've seen people all around the world beginning to notice it and beginning to use it as well, and say, hey, isn't this great? And it is. It is. And what I was going to say is it is getting very broken here. So, and I've had you on the line for, well, for quite a long time, which is very good of you for this sort of rough chat. Is there anything else you can think that I haven't asked you that that you'd like to get out on this one, and then we'll definitely convene again, and maybe even I know wanted to UTM. I generally, when we have our chats on a Tuesday, I'm pretty anti UTM, because am I anti UTM or am I anti what people are suggesting it should contain?
That's a good question.
I am going to stop presenting, and so it's me back just for a few seconds. I'm anti the idea of age restrictions, perhaps only making model aircraft fly within designated areas in order to facilitate, because I think a lot of people see UTMs as a path to providing drone deliveries, more flights in city centres for infrastructure inspections and stuff like that. So I'm very nervous. I'm very nervous at the intentions of you UTM folk. Can I call you a UTM folk?
Oh, you can call us whatever you like, Gary. But I think in order for that kind of maybe it's an insult, I don't know. In order for that label to stick, I think we should agree on the terms, right? And I think I think we could say absolutely that Authoritative Angel has aspirations into helping define what UTM becomes, and perhaps even delivering the services or some of the services that you would rely on as part of the UTM. But we're quite keen to point out that regardless of what's happening around the world right now, there isn't really an end game for UTM. UTM is a means to an end, and people want to use UTM to enable that beyond visual line of sight, fully autonomous, call it the pizza delivery scenarios or whatever that's going to be. For us, UTM really is about three things today. And the reason I say today is because UTM evolves over time. This is why we get a little bit frustrated when we see other companies that say, right, we're a UTM provider and we've got all the UTM and you just need to deploy this app and you're UTM compliant. For us, UTM necessarily adapts and evolves over time. So today, it's about three core things for us. First one is the provision of trustworthy data and services by regulators and authorities through regulated or trusted entities. So that's a bit of a mouthful, but what we're saying is, one of the first key foundation elements before you can even do any of this other sexy automated drone flying is someone has to be able to give that machine the most authoritative data there is. So in other words, if you can prosecute me for doing something in a particular place at a particular time, you have to be able to tell me what I need to know to avoid that prosecution in the first place. So that might mean you have to know where all the privacy hazards are, all the ground hazards are, perhaps where the crowds of people are. Difficult problem to solve, but you have to be able to do that. The second thing is ultimately, it's just the compliance by pilots with technical and non-technical requirements defined by a competent authority to operate under varying conditions in varying scenarios for different purposes. So again, abstracting all of that away, we're saying UTM is a set of rules that people have to abide by. Some of them will be technical rules. You must have a drone that's got GPS on it, or you must have a drone that's got 4G, or not, as the case may be. And some of them, in fact, the majority of them will be procedure-based. You shall not fly within 3 miles of an airport. You shall not fly more than 400 feet above the ground. And then finally, it's about the tighter integration between different stakeholders involved in safeguarding the airspace with a new community of users that use that airspace safely and efficiently. So in other words, drone pilots talking to manned aviation, and manned aviation talking to drone pilots through whatever mechanisms the local country or the authority sets. Now, those three things for us are the foundations of a UTM, but UTM is ultimately predominantly doing all of that through increasingly digital means and higher levels of automation, which ultimately leads to decreasing human involvement over time, right? But crucially, you can only decrease the human involvement if there's a commensurate kind of increase in overall safety. That's the killer for UTM right now. No one can do UTM because they can't do it. They can't assert that it's 100% safe, and that can be true because there's no way.
Just right. Which part's that not 100% safe? That's the interaction with manned aviation, for instance. Bush Pilot 2001 in the comments mentions that.
This is the great thing, because actually the safety argument is a cross-cutting concern, right? It could be talking about the reliability of the transmission between the drone and whatever system it's connected to. It could be talking about the lineage of the data from source to consumption. It could be talking about, if we're talking about things like autonomous command and control, it could be talking about the compliance of the system, which is ultimately giving deconfliction instructions with a known set of regulations and rules. But today, what we're simply saying is, we have laws around the world that require a human in the loop, because not everything can be planned in advance. And there are people that move around in our airspace today, for example, that don't declare their flights or aren't picked up by a radar. So until we can start to address these in a bit more of a technical fashion, a bit more of an inclusive fashion, then actually doing something like flying a drone beyond visual line of sight becomes an inherently less safe activity. I want to say it's unsafe, because it's absolutely not unsafe, but it doesn't mean it is 100% safe. So in other words, before you can get to the next level of UTM, you've got to have solved some of these foundation building blocks. So for us, as I say, UTM really today is more about the people involved in the drone flights, because that's what the law says you are responsible for today. You as the person, the pilot in command, you ultimately have responsibility for complying with the laws. But over time, clearly that's going to look to be changed and relaxed, perhaps even made more stringent in certain areas. But again, you've got to, for us, you've got to have a more inclusive approach for what UTM actually is, because it isn't an app that you deploy in an airport and require everyone in the country to use. It's much more than that. It goes right through to the very generation of that data.
Wow, yeah, it's a fascinating problem to solve, isn't it? Let's say I normally have my hate hat on as regards it, but that's not necessarily, that sounds like I'm really creeping up to you. It's not necessarily because of Altitude Angel, but it's because of what I see others saying and others suggesting and other, shall we say, political moves that are going on. And I personally worry that a lot of things will happen or be put in place to service, let's just say it, drone deliveries, and that won't really work as a business. I don't, in a lot of ways, a lot of it won't work, but I can see regulations staying in place so that particular thing disappears off, doesn't happen, and those companies don't care, they've taken off, they're on to their next idea. But we'll be left as a community, we'll be left with the rules and regulations that were built for them, and then we'll be stuffed. But it's, that's just me, but that's just me.
The way we like to think about it is, look, you can look at UTM as something which closes stuff down, or you can look at UTM as an opportunity to define what needs to happen for the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years of drone use for various different purposes. And we're really keen to kind of support that open view, that long-term view of UTM. And actually, you can't then productize it, right? You can't just say, right, I've got UTM in a box. But what we are quite keen, I think we're a little bit different in terms of other companies, where we see UTM not necessarily having to be a national system, not having to involve every drone pilot, for example. Because if you think about where we care about air traffic today, it isn't everywhere in the country all of the time. We're obviously able to see where air traffic is, but we don't control it over our own country in all the locations, right? We have uncontrolled airspace by its very definition. So why would we seek to control all types of drones, for example? What we do care about is drone traffic in areas that we care about. We clearly would have more of an interest in drones near nuclear power facilities or airports, for example. So it's those areas where perhaps in order to fly in those areas, there are regulations that say, right, your drone and your operation must have these capabilities. And perhaps the more complex that operation becomes, or the closer to some very sensitive infrastructure that becomes, the more stringent those requirements are. But what about, Joe recreational user? That guy wants to fly a 1 or a 2 kilogram, let's call it a phantom drone or something like that. He wants to do that in a big empty field, miles and miles away from everyone. Why does that drone need to be connected to a national UTM, tweeting its position in real time as it flies? Do we need that?
I think I've probably seen the same song sheet there, but there are those out there that would have that would be the situation.
And our goal,
that's the worry.
And we want to create the tools that enable people, sorry, that's my phone going off, people to have those choices. If you're country number one and you decide that that's the policy that's right for you, then Altitude Angel will have a set of tools and technologies that allow not just us but our partners to build apps that support that. But if you want to do it completely differently in a different location, then you should be able to do that, right? And that's what we're about. We see ourselves as essentially as a platform company, rather than a product company, and that
Well,
necessarily
it's
is inclusive.
you don't have to answer this, but then I suppose because you're building all this data, if company A wants to say we are the UTM in the box, but we haven't got time to go grab all this data, they could still come and grab it all off you, I suppose. Is there going to be is it a winners and losers situation? Is the world going to say company A is chosen over company Z, or is it going to be open protocols? So many people can get the information into the centralized point, and then the National Air Traffic Service, wherever, will then just filter it all and chuck it out to whoever needs to see it. Sorry, I didn't put that very well.
No, that's fine. I think there's definitely lots of facets to that question, but I think yes, there definitely should be open protocols. You shouldn't be penalized by working with one particular vendor. If you're a drone manufacturer, for example, you want to sell your products in all the countries of the world. You don't want to have to, if there are 180 odd countries, you don't want to have to build 180 different protocols to connect to 180 different UTM. So the industry's got to sort that out. And through the work I do at Gutmer, through the Global UTM Association, I sit on the board there. We champion that open standards. Sometimes it feels like you're doing that against against a deaf ear, but someone's got to bang that drum, because that's what the industry needs and that's what operators need. To your other points, are there winners and losers? Well, I think if we play UTM out a little bit over the next few years, there are clearly going to be some companies which are selected to deliver things ahead of others. But actually, a lot of what a UTM company is building its business on today, in my opinion, should become commodity. I shouldn't, as Altitude Angel, be the arbiter of all the airspace data in a particular country. But you might choose to work with us because we've got a bunch of other value add services that are really, really good that you really, really need. So in the future, that might mean that we've got very efficient routing algorithms that mean we can get your drone to its destination in a much more kind of fuel efficient way. So you're making fewer course changes. You're able to respect the things that you say are important to you from a privacy perspective, and that's your USP as a UTM provider. So we absolutely believe that you should have multiple UTM companies within a country, because you might choose me, for example, because we're really great at, I don't know, agricultural UTM missions, whereas you might have a competing service also in Reading in England where you don't do agricultural surveys. You specialize in letter delivery. So people can choose you because you're the best letter deliverer, and they choose me because I'm the best farm surveyor. But again, underpinning all of that has to be choice, has to be common standards. So it'd be very interesting to see how that model evolves. That's contrary to the view taken from certain countries. Certain companies would like to be the dominant UTM, but think about it. We've got one sky, right? And the sky is a very sovereign resource to a country. I don't think we're going to have one arbiter of the sky in all of the countries around the world. It's just not going to happen, in my view. But, I've been wrong before. We'll see how it goes. But we build tools, we build tech that enable people smarter than I, in positions of power greater than I, to be able to stitch those together in whatever makes sense for them from a policy perspective and from a regulation perspective.
How far ahead is your head working? Where's your head? Are you 10 years, 20, 30 years ahead? Where's your head?
I think we recognized very early on in our corporate history, say that 2.5 years we've been going, we recognized early on that aviation isn't an industry which deploys something for the next 12 months. It's thinking 20, 25 years ahead. So we decided that to add real value in that sector, we need to be thinking 50 years ahead. So if you do that, I'll give you one little bit of proprietary information, which will be an exclusive SUAS news piece. For us, the U in UTM doesn't mean unmanned, it means unified. And the key for us there is, stuff that's flying around in the air today doesn't need to be disconnected from everything that's on the ground. It's going to need to locate assets on the ground where it can land and recharge, perhaps. We're thinking now about more autonomous use of ground vehicles. So we're going to need to have a unified traffic management system, transport system that can understand where all these things are. So that's where we're thinking. We're thinking at that kind of Futurama scenario where you go 50 years out and the sky is full of drones, you've got autonomous vehicles on the ground. Someone's got to have their eye on the ball trying to envisage what that's going to be to build tools that are useful. So in the support of that goal, in the delivery of that mission, we're trying to release things that are useful and appropriate along the way to make that happen much more quickly. And for us, that means getting more people to fly drones, using those drones more effectively for commercial reasons, for humanitarian reasons. So you, again...
Yes, and then using that data. Yeah, it interests me. I will sorry, we've been chatting too long.
We've been here a while, haven't we?
All night. Yeah,
I'm getting glares from my colleagues now, going, "Come on, you've got to come finish up this report."
Oh, very good. Got to finish the report. It's nice you're around. You got to go finish the report. Very good. I like that. Very good. What I was going to say though, I'm pleased to hear that you're thinking that far ahead, because as much as I like ADSB, because I am a bit of an aircraft spotter, but don't tell anyone that. And it's just, it amazes, from my old air traffic head, it amazes me that you can get a few receivers and you can get a few $10 receivers and Raspberry Pis, and you can get better coverage than governments used to spend a fortune on with radar and stuff like that. But that said, it was a standard conceived in the 1990s, and it's rolling out now. And people are getting very excited about what is a 30-year-old technology. And it's like, no, we should be thinking next.
Welcome to aviation.
Well, yes, I know there is that part to it, and of course, with the way technology works, there's so much faster, cheaper, better ways of doing it that have evolved in that 30 years that it is, anyway, I don't know where I was taking that, but I know where I was taking it. I was taking it that I'm glad that you've got the 50-year ahead mind rather than the 30 years behind, and some of the UTMs are considering that. Anyway, look, we've been going for ages here, so I think I should probably thank you very, very much for taking this much time, and
thank you.
We must do this again.
Yes, I really want to come along to another Tuesday chat. It's just been a bit crazy, but next couple of weeks will be quite busy for us, and you'll see lots of cool announcements coming out of AA in the November-December timeframe. So we'd love to come on and share more of that with you. But for us, we learn through collaboration. We like to talk about our ideas. We refine our ideas by listening. So the last message I would have, if you give me 30 seconds, is to just ask all of your listeners, your viewers, go and use the drone safety map that's on suasnews.com. We're learning how you use it. Send your feedback to us. I personally, and it's still something, it's getting harder to do, but I still personally review all the feedback we get at least once a week, because we need to know what's going on. We need to know what's relevant. We need to know where we're getting it wrong. We need to know what we're doing right. So yeah, use the map, use the products, send in your feedback, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and work with us to help get more people using drones, and address some of those safety concerns that exist today that stop everyone doing more with drones. That would be my ask, if that's okay.
Well, I suppose you've done it, haven't you? No, that's fantastic. Thanks very much, Richard. Thanks, dear viewers that have popped up on this surprising Friday the Link interview. Like, subscribe, do all those other YouTubey things. Don't forget to join us at 2100 hours o'clock GMT every Tuesday for a normal chat. And I look forward to having you back on that, Richard. And I'll argue with you more about UTMs, but you're making it harder and harder for me to do that. And yeah, thank you very much. I'm rubbish at ending these things. Thanks. Have a lovely weekend, everybody, and I'll see you all on Tuesday.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Cheers. Bye-bye.